All right, we're going to get started with the final lesson of Unit 7, which is Lesson 7. And for this lesson, we are going to be solving equations. So we're solving for x. Your final result should be x equals something. And essentially, what we're going to be doing is undoing squaring something or undoing square root and undoing cube root. So basically, the first step is to isolate the radical. Radical is just a symbol or a word that means this symbol. So anything that's outside of the square root or the cube root needs to get moved to the other side. So for example, in example 1, I have the square root of x minus 6 equals 0. So this minus 6 is not part of the square root. I want to isolate the square root, which means get it by itself. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I get square root of x equals 6. Now, step 2 is to undo the root. So I have to undo taking the square root of x. And the opposite of square root is squaring. Square both sides. Square both sides. So I am going to square the left side and square the right side. So the square root of x squared is just x, and 6 squared is 36. So my answer is x equals 36. And it's as easy as that. Now, example 2 is slightly different because we have the cube root of x plus 1. So the opposite of cube root isn't going to be to square both sides. It's going to be to cube both sides. Now, this one is also different than number 1 because that plus 1 is not outside of the cube root. It is inside of the cube root. So actually, the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the cube root by cubing both sides. So the cube root and cubing undo each other, and I get x plus 1 equals 4 cubed, and 4 cubed is 64. And now I'm just going to finish solving for x. If x plus 1 is 64, I'm going to subtract 1, and we get x equals 63. Okay, example 3. This 2 is not inside the square root, so I need to get rid of that first. That's step 1, isolate the radical. Anything that is outside of the square root needs to get removed. So that's 2 times the square root. So to undo the multiplication, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So I'm left with the square root of x plus 2 equals 2. Now I have the square root here. So the opposite of square root is to square both sides. Squaring a square root cancels each other out. I'm left with x plus 2. 2 squared is 4. And last thing I'm going to do is subtract 2 from both sides and get x equals 2. Okay, I would like you to pause the video at this point and try this next row where it says you try. So pause the video, take a couple minutes, try these 3 problems on your own. All right. These first 2, you should have gotten 28 and 23. And if you're not sure if you got something wrong, pause the video, take a look at my work, see if you can figure out how yours is different than mine. But I wanted to go through this last one together because it's kind of a combination of the things we've been working on. If I raise something to the 1/2 power, remember that this is the same as the square root. raising something to the 1/2 power is the same as taking the square root. So this is 4x to the 1/2 is the same as writing square root of 4x. And now that I have it written like that, hopefully if you were stuck on it, you now very clearly see what to do. And the answer is to square both sides. We get 4x equals 36. And then divide by 4. We get x equals 9. Okay, let's try the next set of examples. Example 4, we have x plus 1 to the 1/3. Okay, now remember, raising something to the 1/3 is the same as taking the cube root. So I could rewrite this equation as the cube root of x plus 1. So to undo a cube root, I am going to cube both sides. 3 cubed is 27. And then I'm just going to simply subtract 1 from both sides. And we get x equals 26. Okay, example 5. I need to get rid of anything that is outside of the square root. So first I'm going to add 7 to both sides because that minus 7 is not in the square root. And I still need to get rid of this 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And then I am going to square both sides to undo square root. Gives me x plus 2 equals 16. Then I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and we get x equals 14. Okay, one last example here. I'm going to add 5 to both sides, which gives me 8 times the cube root of 3x minus 4 equals 16. Now what? I still need to get rid of this 8. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8. (16 divided by 8 is 2. Okay, now I need to undo the cube root. And to undo the cube root, I am going to cube both sides. If I undo the cube root by cubing, that just leaves me with 3x minus 4. 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I have 3x equals 12. And then divide by 3, we get x equals 4. Okay, so that is it for the notes. And what you are going to work on for homework is page 19. Okay, I'm going to have you do numbers 1 through 12, but you can skip number 11. Okay, so go ahead and cross off number 11, but the rest of the problems on this page are your homework, and they are due tomorrow.